All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. We are going to get started. So the pandemic seems to be affecting mental health, particularly that of teens. Some teens have experienced anxiety, stress, and depression. Everyone is reacting to the pandemic differently and trying to learn to cope. With all that, we felt it would be great to hear from some experts about things we can do to cope in these difficult times. I'm going to introduce our panelists. We have Paul Clements, and he is a licensed clinical social worker and therapist practicing in Carlisle and working with adolescents and adults and specializing in depression, anxiety, trauma, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Michele Dubbs is the Shippensburg School District's Counseling Department Chair and a guidance counselor for more than 3 decades, beginning at James Buchanan and on staff at Shippensburg since 1991. Camille Rumball is the school psychologist for Shippensburg Area School District, working with elementary, middle school, and high school age students. Caron Zell is a psychologist and licensed practicing counselor who works with a broad population of clients, including children, teens, adults, and families. She's based in Carlisle. Thank you all for being a part of this discussion today. The Student Activism Club collaborated on a pool of questions. We'll draw from those questions for the majority of the hour. If we have time, we hope to take a few questions from our audience too. So if you have any questions to be asked, put them in the chat, and at the end, we will select a few of them. Ray, go ahead.
All right, I'm Maria Knight, and we would like to direct our first question to Paul Clements. Mr. Clements, what are the warning signs that what someone is feeling isn't just sadness, but is serious enough that someone should seek help? And it might be an indicator of a more serious issue.
First of all, thanks so much for having me here this evening. And, I think this is a fantastic idea and an important time for us to have this discussion. And I think just in response to that question first, I want to offer out that as far as seeking help, there's no time that is too early as far as, even if someone feels like, oh, I'm not sure if I should, get help. I've been having some of these challenges. I would say, it always can be helpful to reach out to a friend, a family member, a school counselor, or some other individual or an outside counselor for assistance. But as far as the question goes, when you're really looking at, okay, is this just a normal range of moods that I'm having or change in behaviors, especially during this more difficult time, then how do I know, how serious this is? And there are some things that we can look at first, and some of them are on an emotional level. Are we having periods of crying and maybe they just come on suddenly and we're not sure why? Are we feeling, more irritable, angry, annoyed, getting in more arguments or withdrawing from others? Are we feeling frustrated? More often? How about feelings of guilt or shame or, that voice in our head that talks to us on a regular basis, is it saying more negative things on an ongoing basis than it has? And how long have these things been going on? Is this just for today? Has it been just the last couple days? Are we looking over weeks or months? And then, we also want to look at, are there some behavioral changes? So, and behaviorally, are we, have we had a change in our eating? Are we eating more or eating less? Have we gained or lost a significant amount of weight? Has our school performance gone down? And I would offer that right now, I think across the board, because there has been a change in how we're going to school and how we're interacting with school, that certainly has been more of a norm, but to what degree is that happening? Are we sleeping more or having a hard time going to sleep? And then again, when I talked about the social withdrawal, are we really isolating ourselves, not wanting to engage with others? And maybe we used to like doing certain things and now we don't like them anymore, or we're just not interested in them. And then finally, and maybe one of the most important things to look at is, are we having thoughts of death and dying, or contemplating, having a sense that things have always been bad, or that they will always be bad in the future? Do we have a sense that, we might be feeling sad or down or anxious now, but things are going to get better? And if it doesn't feel like, if we don't have that sense of, I know that this is difficult right now, but things will get better, then that's a time we absolutely want to reach out to someone else and get some help. And then one thing I actually forgot to mention is that sometimes, we think of things so often in terms of just mental and physical, but a lot of times when we're having some mental health challenges, we experience that physically as well. So we might be having more headaches, or almost feel like we have flu-like symptoms, like don't feel like getting out of bed, or just kind of feel weighted down through the day. And if we're experiencing those things, then we, again, it's a time to, reach out, talk to someone, talk to, those people that I mentioned before. I think Mr. Martin has also put up some resources here, or the group here has also put up some resources. But I think, that those are some things to look toward. The other panelists might have some other ideas or additions to that as well.
Yeah, I really like what you were talking about at the very end there, that sense of, are things feeling really bad right now? Or, it kind of speaks to this idea of hope as a real marker for thinking about how bad it is right now, and do I seek help? What's my sense of hope that things are going to improve? And is that really hard for me to, is a sense of hope hard for me to come up with right now? Because that's a concern if that's the case.
And one more piece too is teenagers and adolescents, and we've all ascribed to this at times, an all or nothing thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I am, if this happens, then everything is lost. And sadly, it's being able to refocus and reshift that focus, because it isn't all lost. There is always another piece, another road, another opportunity. However, it's really hard sometimes to just see that one more step. So the all or nothing thinking is indeed something that I see with teenagers. And as stated, we all kind of have felt that at one time.
Sure. I really like that, Michelle. And that's a great point as far as, I get a bad grade, or I, break up with a partner, or something bad happens in my life, or might happen. Do I have a sense that, this will be painful, and, it will be okay too. And that's a really important thing. And I think sometimes hard to recognize at those times.
Yeah, I like what you said, Paul, about, right now it's painful, but things will be okay. I think something really important to remember is that emotions aren't fixed. So what you're feeling right now in this moment can be completely different than how you're feeling tomorrow. And then just looking at a broader sense of things, I know the pandemic can be, it's been hard on a lot of us. It's gotten a lot of us down, but it's also time limited. So it will end. There is light at the end of the tunnel. I think those are two really important things to remember.
Mm-hmm. Well, and to add to that, not only are emotions and feelings not fixed, but there are a lot of things that we can do to shift them, to actively work at shifting them.
Something I would like to add to the question to kind of extend on. While some of us are just experience these feelings or notice that maybe something's off. People have experienced these hopelessness, the endless negative emotions for a long period of time. Some people as long as we can remember, and it's just so normal they don't realize that it's problematic. What would you say is something that you should know in yourself you might have experienced
Hey, Ray.
for a long time?
No one can hear you well. Can you write it out if you want to ask it? Ray, I'm not sure if you heard me, but we can't hear you that well right now.
Can you hear me better now that I've turned my video on?
Yes.
Yes, that's much
Okay.
better.
My question was just, sorry, my internet never does that. While some people are just starting to have these negative feelings or notice changes in behavior because of the pandemic or maybe other things going on in their life, some people have experienced negative patterns of behavior, emotion, and thinking for years now, or for as long as they can remember. It's becoming very common for people to have an onset at an earlier age of depression and anxiety and other issues. What would you say is something we can notice within ourselves that maybe we should have been seeking help if we have experienced these kinds of things as long as we can remember and they seem normal to us at this point?
Well, I guess one thing I might offer is sometimes it's helpful in those circumstances to we have other people around us too who might be giving us information or feedback, and so sometimes if we're having a hard time kind of self-monitoring because we've experienced these feelings for a long time and they feel normal, are there other people in our lives who who we trust, who might be pointing out some things to us that say, hey, maybe this is a good idea to get some help. And I guess my other thought is, Ray, is that if we have a sense that this is something we've been experiencing for a long time, then that in of itself might say, and it feels normal to us, but we know that, then that in of itself might say, hey, it's time to get some help. Are there other thoughts, or does that answer your question, Ray?
That does. If anyone else wants to add to it, though, I certainly have no problem.
Well, I think that what often happens, and I believe that when school is social, and you're around other students, that you align yourself with the other students. And sometimes when you're in conversation in a classroom, or when you read something, it's an aha moment. It's, oh, wait, doesn't everybody feel this way? Isn't everybody's household like this? And you start to question, and that's the beauty of socialization, and then also as adolescents, when and it could be younger too, when that point of realization that, am I the odd man out, or is what I'm thinking and feeling so profound that somebody else is feeling and thinking that too? And that then becomes almost a generalization. Does everybody feel it? What do I need to do? And gee, and so the courage point is, how do I feel? Is it not good? Is it good? And who do I trust within myself to share that information with, and then subsequently get that help? So it's the acknowledgement that's, there's some incongruence here. I'm not feeling right in the complexity of what we have, and we're all not Hallmark families here. So that's when you find the point of reaching out and getting the assistance and sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get that assistance that you need, that fits well for you, and you are changing and evolving too.
Okay, so our second question, I guess third, would be, is it normal to feel so distant and detach ourselves from everyone right now, even family and very close friends? And how should we overcome this feeling? Mrs. Dubb, can you start us off with your thoughts on that?
Thanks, Amaya. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the ability to be on this panel of amazing people who help and assist people in general. People helping people. Wow. amazing. So when I first read that question, or when it was assigned, if you will, to me, I felt, so what do I think? Well, there's 2 points to this. The isolation piece could specifically be when you think of isolation, when you're putting yourself away from the maelstrom of what's happening outside, can be a very productive thing. It's that you're taking that step back and saying, I need to do some self-healing and some self-help to being able to be productive in the greater. However, it could be that the person then freezes in that moment and then doesn't reach out to anyone or use any mechanism of support. That's the turning point. That's when they self-isolate and only stay in their bed and don't want to go anywhere, don't want to do anything, and don't feel themselves and just kind of mire and perseverate on the issue. I feel that it's that sense of when they recognize, and hopefully there are some people there to being able to help and assist the student or otherwise, to say, hey, this isn't okay. This isn't healthy for you. Teenagers love teenagers to commiserate with. And my hope is that within the social media or the web that they create, that it is a possible or a positive interaction with another student that can be helpful and supportive to commiserate with the understanding of the issues. Like, man, yeah, I feel this way too. Or man, that teacher in that class really stinks. I don't like any of that. However, for them to being able to say, how can we work together bringing each other up? Because we all know that there's sometimes students that say, yeah, I'll commiserate with you and we'll game all the time and school will just go away, and then all of a sudden the problems don't go away. They just escalate. So it's the isolation piece of recognizing the fact that you need to take yourself out, maybe write, maybe read, maybe paint, maybe do all the fun things that you need to do, maybe goal set. Okay, tomorrow I'm going to try to write a little bit about what's going on. Okay, tomorrow I'm going to reach out and maybe send that text to somebody to help me out. Those little goal steps to make those. And then the next piece would be to work together and collaborate with that one special friend, a parent, a teacher, and something, to being able to lift yourself up so that you're not stuck in the mired mold. And that's my thought on it initially. I hope that answers the question.
It does. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If anyone else has thoughts on that.
I think I might just, I just to add and maybe say the same thing, but in a slightly different way, yet that oftentimes we wait to feel like doing something before we take those initial steps. And sometimes when we're in that really difficult space of not wanting to push ourselves past that boundary, we almost have to do that before we get the motivation. We take that small step, like Michele was saying, and then that small step actually provides some feedback to us to say, oh, okay, this wasn't so bad. So, I spent some time with this person, or I did this, and maybe I initially had that anxiety, but once I got out there and did it, I actually enjoyed myself. And so then that reinforces itself. But sometimes we just have to do before we feel like doing.
I think another important piece too to add on to what Mr. Clements and Mrs. Dubbs have said is just how important that self-care piece is. So taking care of your body, because that is going to have a major impact on how you're feeling, the things that you're thinking, your behaviors. So just your basic, the things that we hear all the time, like try to eat right, exercise regularly, get a good night's sleep, because all of that is going to impact, not just how we're physically feeling, but also how we're emotionally, mentally feeling as well.
All right, we're going to move on to the next question. Caron Zell. Oh, actually, sorry. Camille Rumball. Our club members asked this question, which is going through many minds. Physical and emotional isolation can heighten social anxiety dramatically. What are healthy coping habits and strategies to work on these struggles, and how would you address that?
Sure. So I also just want to say thank you guys for inviting me to be here today. I really appreciate it. So as far as the isolation piece goes in the social anxiety, so let's just first talk about social anxiety. I know it's something that we hear a lot, but what exactly is it? So people living with social anxiety have an intense fear and just an intense and persistent fear that they are going to experience embarrassment or humiliation or rejection from others. So as a way to cope with this, they often avoid social interaction and going out and being with people. So obviously, social distancing during the pandemic has made it easier for us to avoid socializing, which may provide short-term relief. However, it can also maintain that social anxiety. And a lot of people may find it difficult to resume their normal activities once, now that we're coming out of the, quarantining and, hopefully as we near the end of this pandemic. So they're just having trouble resuming things like maybe going to the grocery store, maybe shaking somebody's hand, maybe giving somebody a hug. Isolation, we need to remember, can have a negative effect on our mental health. So it is important to stay connected. And if you do some research on the isolation and the social anxiety piece, a lot of experts are recommending to continue to try to stay connected to your loved ones during the pandemic. So as we know, with the social distancing and the restrictions that are all in place right now, interactions are going to look a little different than how they were, right? So some things that are being recommended, just, things for us to consider, that we can connect via phone, we can connect by text, we can FaceTime our friends, we can Skype, we can Zoom, we can connect on social media, we can mail letters or cards or send emails. So again, just trying to maintain that connection. And again, it's all going to come down to just having a healthy balance. We obviously all need, our time to ourselves sometimes. Some of us were kind of really enjoying that isolation maybe there at the beginning when things first started up last spring. But just finding that healthy balance. How much is too much? And also, I'm always going to go back to this too, that self-care is just really important. So making sure that you're eating right, you're exercising, you are getting enough sleep. I don't know if anybody has anything else to add to that.
I think I'll add with that, whether it's social anxiety or whether it's some other type of anxiety that's being experienced, there's such a physical component to it that our brains and our bodies are sort of communicating with each other that there's something that's not safe, that we're at risk, that there's harm. And so that's a big part of what's causing, our rapid heartbeat or the breathing that gets quicker or the butterflies in the stomach and all of these physical reactions that we have to anxiety, including the social anxiety that can be felt. So in thinking about what's happening physically, one thing that's really important to, I think, add to the toolbox are some interventions to specifically combat that. So in thinking about some particular breathing exercises, thinking about ways to have some relaxation tricks, whether it's muscle relaxation, whether it's something like stretching, yoga, whether it is visualizing a calm scene or time in your head. There are all kinds of apps that are geared exactly towards these things, and they can be as easy as a minute to 5 minutes. It can be something that comes in handy, let's say, right before some kind of interaction. But I do think that some of that is important for someone who's experiencing social anxiety, to help them prepare for maybe the discomfort of making the phone call or sending the text or going out to the place that they haven't been to for a while. Ways to really basically trick your brain back into saying, oh, that's right, there's no real harm here. I'm not unsafe. Everything's okay. So just wanted to add that piece of it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I really like that, Karen. The only additional piece that I was also thinking about is some sort of physical exertion as well. Sometimes is very helpful, like, you know, some exercise, something to kind of get our body. And I actually think a lot of times doing some sort of exercise and then doing the relaxation actually helps, because sometimes if we sit and we try and do those apps and things and we're already really geared up, it's really hard to get into the space to even listen to something like that. But if we've exerted ourselves a little first to kind of get our system expend some of that built up energy, and then we sit down and we listen to one of those meditation apps or do some yoga or something like that, that can be really beneficial at times.
And if I could say this, one more thing which complements all of that, having people in your life that can say, is that real to you? Having them, other people understand the reality of that anxiety being so real that it can incapacitate students. And that is so important, that you validate that other student, the parents do or teachers do, and saying, wow, that must really hurt. Tell me more. What's happened here? Help me understand what you're going through right now. And I think the student then would feel validated, like, oh okay. And that I'm not the only one who's ever felt this. No, you're really not. So.
Yeah, I really like that point, actually, because anxiety is something that can be so invisible to those around us. It's such an internal experience. It's something that we feel very strongly as it's happening, but it can be so invisible to those around us. So that idea of, you know, this is real to you and let me better understand that. I like that idea of being able to actually, you know, take it a little bit of outside of the head and make it more of a conversation piece, a getting to know you better piece.
Absolutely. And to complement both of those, you know, sometimes we feel bad that we feel that way, or there's something really wrong with us that we're having those feelings and we shouldn't have that experience, or what's wrong with us. And sometimes we're getting those messages from the outside too. And so, you know, just like Mrs. Dubbs said, that it's really important to have someone validate that experience for us.
Wow, I'd like to thank you all. I feel like those specific examples were really insightful and helpful to the reality of the situation. This next question is directed to Caron Zell. Ms. Zell, students have been asking, how can we find motivation during these difficult times? And what would you tell someone who's struggling with motivation? How do you address that?
Yeah, so, well, and like everyone else, thank you all for having me here. It's great to be able to participate in something like this, and I hope that the information that comes out of it can be helpful to anyone who's listening now or who views it later. So when I was taking a look at this question, and actually a good bit of what was talked about by Ms. Dubbs in the second question really dovetails with the idea of motivation. But what was initially hard for me was in thinking about what's getting in the way of motivation happening. It can really be a very individual experience to know how to problem solve from person to person. It's something I talk a lot about with my clients, but for a variety of reasons. So let's say it is motivation that is stemming from some depression, right? That's going to be a more physiological experience, really lacking that energy, really lacking that something getting in the way from wanting to do things that previously we engaged with. Or in going back to talking about anxiety, Lacking motivation when there's heightened anxiety can be more of a sense of feeling stopped or feeling at risk of moving forward, not knowing how to get started. You know, and then there are some things that can look like a lack of motivation. Someone who may manage symptoms of ADHD, what might look like poor motivation can actually be distractibility or difficulty focusing. And so what we see behaviorally is that someone's not getting done the tasks that they need to be getting done, but they're highly motivated to get other tasks done. And so, you know, I think really considering what's getting in the way of feeling motivated and what are the things that aren't happening that the student wants to have happening. Motivation, we kind of break down into two areas, and it's either internal, intrinsic motivation, or external motivation coming from others. I assume, you know, for this purpose, it's about how to build internal motivation. And kind of like what's already been talked about, some of the real key things to keep in mind are, what is your diet? What is your sleep schedule? What is your routine? Because when these things are off, motivation to complete tasks can very easily get derailed. You know, one of the very, I guess, basic things that I would say is stop and take inventory on what your goals are. What are some of your longer term goals for the next year? What are some of your really short term goals? Are you motivated to get out of bed and brush your teeth? Are you motivated to apply to college, right? So there are two huge differences in terms of that, and there's everything in between. So I would say stop and take inventory into what some of your goals are. What is it that you want to accomplish that's not happening now? And how to break that down into really small chunks, bite-sized pieces, some things that let us know, okay, I could check the box or I could cross these things off the list today. I got them done. And a couple of these other things might take me a week, or a couple of these other things might take me even longer. But make sure there are some small bite-sized things that can be accomplished to sort of build on. I think, as Mr. Clements had mentioned, you know, the idea of, I might not feel motivated yet, but if I go and do this 5-minute workout, it might just feel good enough and give me a little bit of traction that I'll keep going after that. So those were the key thoughts that I kind of had initially, and I don't know. Well, one more thing I didn't add. So if distractibility is behind what looks like the poor motivation, and I know for students who are, particularly students who are doing school virtually right now, I know that the phone can really be an easy source of distractibility and can get in the way of accomplishing tasks, even if the student has a desire to complete those tasks. You know, one thing that happens with social media, or with really any kind of internet use, any use on the phone, is that quickly stimulates neurochemicals that we have that are a reward. And it feels good. It feels good right away in ways that we don't really think about, but that's what's happening in the brain. So if you're working from home to try to get school accomplished, it might not be a bad idea to think about having your phone in a different room or completely turned off for chunks of time, so that you're not as tempted to reach for it and scroll every 2 minutes or every 5 minutes, or when, oh, I'm stuck on a math problem. Okay, let me go grab my phone and just take a break really quickly. Those things will get in the way. So
I'm going to compliment you, Caron, because this is exactly what goes on, in that what's my stuff and what's their stuff. Mm-hmm. The phone is all about what else is going on. And wait a minute, if I have my list of things to do, that's mine. Mm-hmm. What can I do? What's internal as opposed to what's external? You know, what can I control? What is controlling me? And I really feel that that's the motivator too. If you can figure out what's mine you're going to keep a little more focus going on there as opposed to all the other blah.
Mhm. Mhm.
I think I just wanted to add to that. We've talked a lot, and it's very true about the importance of our habits as far as sleep and eating. And I also want to acknowledge to some degree how hard those are to break or challenge in certain ways. And so, some tricks that we might be able to do to help ourselves to say, okay, can I actually, after my 40th TikTok video or my 6th episode of Netflix or, whatever it is, can I convince myself to, it's time to turn this off? And so there might be certain things like, one is if you are on your phone or your computer, set a timer on there and set a timer that goes off after a certain amount of time. So, and then tell yourself that once this timer goes off, that's it. I'm done with this, whether it be, binge watching Netflix or on some sort of social media or something like that. With the eating, I think it's helpful, to plan ahead, a couple healthy things that I'm going to eat each day, but not giving it up all together, recognizing that I do need to treat myself. So I do need to treat myself even with, some of the social media stuff, some of the TV or things like that. But if I can term it in terms of this is a reward versus I'm doing this to avoid this other thing, then that can shift my thinking around it. And if I set it as a reward, so I'm going to do this much schoolwork, or I'm going to do this much exercise, and then I'm going to give myself the reward of these things, whatever that is, I think that can be a helpful way to look at it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and sometimes to add to that, what can happen is that if you set that, first I'll do the work, whatever the length of time, whatever the structure is, and then I earn the reward for myself. Sometimes what can happen is if I tell myself, all right, I'm going to do 5 minutes of exercise, or I'm going to do 15 minutes of this assignment, once we actually engage and start doing it, we may end up doing it for longer than that minimum time that we gave ourselves. So it can really be a benefit that we find out, doing it that way works even better than planned sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's some reward in that then. Oh gosh, I actually feel good because I was able to get these 6 things done and now I want to do 4 more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Good.
And then just one more quick piece to add, that something important to remember, if you are feeling this way, so you're feeling like you're lacking motivation, you're having trouble getting things done, just remember that you aren't alone. You're not the only one who is feeling this way. This is something that adults are feeling, a lot of students are feeling. A lot of people are experiencing this after months of working from home, doing school from home, just constantly being in that same environment, not knowing when this is all going to end, when we'll go back to normal. And as we've talked about, some people are experiencing physical and mental health challenges. So obviously all of this is going to affect our ability to focus on our responsibilities and then to also be enthusiastic about them. So just please remember that you are not alone and that there is always help out there.
Thank you for your input. Our next question is coming from a student. Right now, we're kind of, at least in my opinion, on the forefront of making mental health a discussion that everyone can talk about. And our generation is doing a really good job at bringing it up with each other and addressing that sometimes people need extra help. But some of the older generations are still struggling with that, and the idea that we need to see therapists and might need medication to help. If a student wants to seek therapy, counseling, or maybe even medication in order to help with their mental health, how would you suggest going to their parents about that issue, especially if you know parents are going to be resistant?
Sometimes sometimes a good first stop might be the family doctor or the pediatrician. You know, I'm really not feeling well. I'm having a hard time having energy. Perhaps, you know, talking a little bit more about some of the physical symptoms, saying, can we make a doctor's appointment? That can, for a parent who's not on board with the idea of therapy or help seeking, that might be a little bit more of a familiar place. It's already a known helping person. So, you know, sometimes a first stop might be a family doctor or pediatrician, or certainly a guidance counselor who's already in the system that that child is in.
And the piece to that too would be a student assistance team referral, whereby we align with Teen Line, or it's Penn State counseling that we also align with, as well as drug and alcohol counseling, whereby whatever the student's needs are, we could have them assessed, and then that information would be alongside with the parent, gaining an understanding of that assessment and then making the next steps.
Just to ask, and maybe this, do the students know how to get a student assistance team referral, or is that something that just happens if they go to their school counselor or their teacher or coach? Or
any person can make a student assistance team referral. Now we have a paper and pencil model that the students could put in and put it. It's in, well, there's one in the nurse's office, there's one in the library. You could also talk to your teachers. You could talk to anybody. We make a referral electronically. However, there is still the paper and pencil model that they have a dedicated box that's checked every day.
There's also an email. I know, speaking from the middle school, which is where my office is, we have an actual email address that students could email. It's, again, this is available on the school website, but it's sams_sap@ship.k12.pa.us. You can find that on the school website, but that is also an option as well.
Okay, and our second student asked question would be, for when you're having students having a depressive or an anxiety episode, what are some healthy coping mechanisms that they can do to like get them through that, or they can give some advice to their friends?
You want to get them present. You need to be able to do some breathing exercises, and that can be as easy as taking your hands and placing them on your chest and feeling that heart and feeling that lung and being able to close your eyes and breathe in and breathe out. Nobody needs to know anything that's going on in your head and your heart right there. It's just you getting quiet. The next piece that you can easily do is put your hands right on your knees as you're sitting there and trying to feel like you're seated. You're sitting in that seat. You're feeling your feet in your shoes. Those shoes are on the floor, and you're sitting on that seat. Is it comfortable, or are you reaching around? And go through the entirety of your body. Those are two easy. Nobody needs to know what's going on. And if it's happening in the classroom, obviously, if it goes further and you can't calm yourself down, then you put your hand up and say, I really need to get to the nurse, or the nurse needs to come see me, obviously within school. But sometimes it's as quickly as when you're looking around and you're saying, uh-oh, uh-oh, uh-oh. And then if you could say, I am safe, I am safe, I am peaceful, I am kind, I am okay. Whatever that you can come up with, but getting back into yourself, because you're everywhere else, you need to get back into you. And those are things, please compliment that thoughts there, but those are a couple of real quick techniques I use with students all the time.
Yeah, so we call those grounding techniques. And basically what that means is, particularly if you're feeling a lot of panic, if you're feeling really overwhelming emotions in that moment, you're going to focus on the senses. You're going to be focusing on, what do I feel right now? How am I, what do I see? What can I smell? And those are all things, when we think about our five senses and we are getting ourselves back into the present moment of what we're paying attention to that way, it can really calm down our central nervous systems and help us, you know, to slowly re-regulate in that moment. And, you know, like Ms. Dubbs said, all of those things, there are a lot of grounding techniques that can be done, and no one around you is the wiser.
Mhm.
And then just some tips in case you are the friend who is trying to provide that support, right? So maybe you're not the one who is experiencing that moment of anxiety or depression, but you're on the other side of things and you're that friend that is trying to be supportive and caring. Just some things to remember is to, you know, talk to that person in a calm, caring, non-judgmental way. You want to listen, you know, don't lecture, just listen to them. You want their feelings are very real. So, you know, you want to help validate their feelings, and then just offer your support and your understanding and encouragement as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I guess one of my thoughts was, so you had mentioned a depressive episode, and I think, you know, a lot of the things that were talked about were, you know, related to anxiety or panic or things like that. And so our response to that might be different than our response to depression, which, you know, might be kind of feeling like we're moving through sand or having a hard time motivating or feeling really down or hopeless. Some of those experiences. And then in some of those cases, you know, I think it really goes back to a lot of what we've talked about previously, you know, the doing small things. You know, there's actually a name for that, behavior activation. And, you know, the idea is, and it goes back to what I said before, but activation before motivation. So can I get myself to do certain small tasks and then start to feel good about accomplishing those? Am I, you know, taking care of my body? Am I getting the right amount of sleep? And, you know, what am I doing to, you know, and then who am I reaching out to connect with, whether that be a friend. And I'm going to digress slightly because I think sometimes too, like we might have a friend that comes to us, and sometimes that friend is going through some really difficult things, and then we end up feeling responsible for keeping them okay. And I think it's important at those times, you know, while we absolutely want to be, you know, a listening ear and someone to be close to them, but if we start worrying about their safety, then we need to let someone else know about that as well, because, you know, that's a little too much for us to carry, and sometimes we feel like we're the only one that's carrying that for our friend.
I just put in the chat, safe to say, in that if after hours and you're texting to somebody 2 o'clock in the morning, which tends to be when kids are texting and interacting with each other. If I wanted to get a student, if I wanted to stay up that long at 2 o'clock, that's probably when I would really want to get a hold of them and email them at about 2 o'clock in the morning. However, for the students that have a concern about another, the Safe to Say program is the way for them to being able to get help if they're immediately very, very concerned that some student could harm themselves in some capacity. That would be the mechanism that the student would use that immediately gets the help and assistance for that student that they need.
Thank you for that. So the hour is up, and I would like to thank you all for joining us, especially our guest panelists, Paul Clements, Michele Dubbs, Camille Rumball, and Caron Zell. This talk has been recorded, and a link of the video will be available on the club website beginning on Monday, April 5th. Thank you all for attending, and have a wonderful night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.